What's going on, everybody? Alex Quinn here, and you're listening to Hustle Inspires Hustle. Today's guest is pushing the boundaries of what it means to live longer, stronger, and smarter. Chris Mirabile is the founder and CEO of Novos, a groundbreaking company backed by science from Harvard and MIT that's changing the game in longevity. After surviving a brain tumor at just 16, he made it his mission to master his health. And today, he's 13.6 years younger than his biological age. From pioneering formulas to redefining wellness with major partners like Equinox and Erewhon, this is one episode that will change the way you think about aging, business, and purpose. What's going on, man? Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, of course. It's great to be here, Alex.
Hey, man, I like that background. I like the type of business that you're running. I like that you're close. You're in Florida. We were just talking right before the podcast. You're Italian, love Italian food. I think we have a few things in common here that we could talk about. It's going to be a good episode.
I can spend the whole day talking about any of those topics.
Longevity, man, so exciting. I've been so into it lately, just from like listening to podcasts, reading, and thinking about its importance, especially because of my family, right? I think about my folks, like my parents, and I'm like, how, like I want them around for as long as possible. I want to be around as long as possible for my family. Like there's so many things going on, so many exciting things to talk about. But before we jump into that, why don't you give me a little bit of a 2-3 minute summary of who you are and how you got Novos to where it is, and we'll dive in deeper.
Sure, happy to. So I grew up in Long Island, New York. I've been interested in health ever since I was 12 years old. I started reading Men's Health magazine, and I was inspired by the guys on the cover. I wanted to be attractive like them. That was my way to try to, attract the girls in elementary school. So I started doing pull-ups and exercising from a very early age. And so, by most standards, you would say that I was healthier than my classmates. So it was that much more of a surprise to everyone that I was suddenly diagnosed with a brain tumor when I was 16. We discovered it when I was on a school trip in New York City. I was at the Federal Reserve Bank, and I was listening to somebody speak, and suddenly I got very dizzy and nauseous. And I told myself I'll count to 10 before I get up to get some help. And I counted to 7, and I never hit 8. Next thing I knew, I woke up on the floor with blood all over my shirt because I had had a seizure, and I severed my tongue, and the blood was all over my shirt. And they rushed me to the emergency room, and they eventually gave me a CAT scan when my parents arrived, and they said, "We found a large mass above your left ear by your temporal lobe. It was larger than a golf ball." And that's when they told me I had a brain tumor. And so we had to do emergency surgery within just a few days. And fortunately, everything was removed safely. I do joke if I ever forget something, it's because half of my brain was removed. But
Got
that's just my excuse if I ever forget like someone's name or like an anniversary or something. But
my grandma
uh,
has a similar situation, and she says the same thing, so I could identify with that joke like fully. Wow.
yeah, so fortunately everything did work out. It took me some time to recover, and that was SAT year, and that was difficult, but overall it transformed me in many ways. I went from playing on the high school football team to like writing in a journal and poems like on a Friday night as a 16, 17-year-old, just reflecting on the experience I had gone through. So it expanded me in many different ways. And it planted this seed in my mind that I never wanted to be in a situation like that again, where I was laying in a hospital bed and not sure if I was going to wake up the next morning or not. And it's a really scary place to be, especially as a teenager. And so anything I could do to try to prevent that situation from happening again, whether through a brain tumor or Alzheimer's or heart disease or another form of cancer, any of those things I wanted to avoid. And so going through my 20s, I lived a healthy life. And other than some drinking, living in New York City, I was eating healthy, I was sleeping well, I was exercising, and so on. But I was also doing scientific research to try to be on the cutting edge of what researchers are finding about health and improving our performance, optimizing our biology, and extending health span and lifespan. And I came across a scientific paper about a decade ago called Hallmarks of Aging. And this is a famous paper now. It's considered a seminal paper in the field of biogerontology, which is the study of the biology of aging. And it identified at the time 9 different biological reasons why we get older. This is at a microscopic scale. And since then, the authors have added 3 more just about a year ago. So we're up to 12 biological root causes of aging. And when I came to read this paper, it made me understand that aging is not something that's like a fixed process, either determined by our genetics or, a lot of people say, I will live as long as my parents did or my grandparents. And it's not that simple. It's actually much more than our genetics. Genetics only account for about 10 to 30% of our lifespan. 70 to 90% of it is actually lifestyle. And so you can actually slow down or speed up your rate of aging. And there's many studies to prove this. So that made me feel empowered that like I can actually do things that slow down my aging. And the reason this is important is because the number one risk factor for cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, glaucoma, sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle. You go down the list of these chronic illnesses. The number one risk factor is aging. So anything we can do to slow down aging is going to have an even bigger, more pronounced effect on the risk that you have of getting any of these diseases than practically anything else. And so that started me on my journey to eventually found my company Novos.
I love that. I want to go back to the high school portion for a little bit. Um, how is like during recovery, how was your experience with like self-esteem and being a teenager and you wanting to be out there but recovering and maybe not feeling at your 100% in that specific moment? Was that a big challenge?
Yeah, it was definitely a big challenge for a number of reasons. One is that when they did the surgery, they shaved half of my head to then actually cut my skull open. And it's like, why didn't you just shave the whole thing off? Who actually wants to have like half of their head with
Yeah,
hair
for
and the other half without?
real.
But it looked terrible. But then we shaved the whole thing off, and I don't look good with no hair. Like some people look great with their head shaved. I'm not one of those people. So like, first of all, physically, I didn't feel confident, and I had this scar and staples in my head and everything. I looked off,
Mhm.
and then mentally, I wasn't there. So I remember I was very fortunate. I had tutors to come to my home to try to make sure I didn't fall back a grade.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to teach me things. And I remember for my history teacher, my tutor, she read me a sentence and she said, Chris, repeat this sentence to me that I'm about to read to you. So she read it and I couldn't even repeat the sentence. My memory was so poor, I couldn't remember what she had just said. And it was a combination of the inflammation from the surgery to the anti-seizure medication I had to take and so on. And so I just wasn't even cognitively there. And so 100%, like it did impact my self-esteem. But I think more importantly, in the grand scheme of things, it taught me so much. Like between that experience where I felt like I had a learning disability, which I hadn't had prior, like school always came easily to me. Now I had like a true learning disability. To even pre-op, they did testing on me. And one of the tests they did was they sent a chemical into my brain, all the way from my groin, all the way up into my brain. And they turned off different regions of my brain for about 20 minutes at a time with this chemical because they wanted to see like what brain function they might be impacting from the operation. And one of the things they turned off was my speech. And they showed me a banana. And they said, Chris, what is this? And I'm thinking in my head, like, do you think I'm an idiot that doesn't know what a banana is? Like, because I didn't know what they were testing. I had no idea what they had just done to me.
Yeah.
So I try to say banana and I say banana. I
Yeah.
can't actually say the word banana. And they did this with a number of different objects, asking me what they were. And it was so incredibly frustrating, but also at the same time, upon reflection afterwards, and this is where like the poetry and writing journals comes in, was reflecting on these experiences. I came to see it as a beautiful experience that I could actually understand at least a fraction of what it feels like to have a disability where you can't actually speak and you can't actually state words or pronounce words and so on, and how frustrating that must be for someone who has the words in their head but they can't actually
Yeah.
state them. So yes, self-esteem was an issue, but I think ultimately over time it actually crystallized into these life lessons and experiences that helped me to relate with people better than I had prior.
So how crazy, bro, how like it took for you to get a tumor as a teenager for for life to like play out the way that it did and you to potentially be adding like years of life to like potentially millions of people and like more moments of families sharing together and less fucked up moments of like sadness and uncertainty and hospitals and you know what I'm saying? Like you don't have all the answers, bro, but like that really like fucked up thing. Well, if you choose to look at it like as a fucked up thing, because it's actually like it led to something beautiful. It could actually be looked at as a beautiful thing. Like I was almost thinking while you were talking is like, I hope that he's grateful for his tumor because you're changing so many people's lives. Like that moment was hard for you, but it was like a sacrifice in your life that was made for these incredible things to happen now. Like those are like the really crazy cool stories that people want to hear about, man. Because you could have easily just been like, I have a disability now. Like I'm not gonna do like I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna live off the government. I'm gonna complain. I'm gonna get down on myself. Like, damn, bro, super cool. I'm happy for you, brother. You're doing your damn thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I made sure that anything that happens to us, we have the power, even if we tell ourselves we don't, we actually have the power to determine how we're going to interpret it and how we're going to file it in our minds, in our memories, right? And so I had the option. It's like being at a crossroad, right? You have the option to look at this experience as if I'm a victim and why me and why did God do this to me? And like I'm so healthy and I work so hard on my health. This shouldn't have happened to me. And I could start pouting and feeling bad for myself. But when has that ever done anything good for anyone? It's never done anything good for anyone, right? And so if instead I try to find the silver lining and I try to find the good from the experience, that then gives me the opportunity to actually make good from the situation. And we all know like the hardest situations in our lives are the ones that we can learn the most from. When everything's good and you're just coasting through life, you're not learning quite like when you go through a difficult period because it stops you in your tracks. You have a lot of time to yourself to really contemplate and think about things. And so I made the conscious decision to file this in my memory as the best experience of my life. And it has become the best experience of my life because I wanted it to be the best experience of my life. And so from that, other things have come. Like you said, I want to reduce the pain and the torture that comes from disease in
Yeah.
this world. And when I was starting the business, my first year prior to us launching our first product, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And after just 9 months, and I was very, very close to my mother, I lost her after just 9 months. And it made what I was doing that much more important. Like I dedicate my company Novos to her, and I try to uphold the moral and ethical standards that she would expect me to uphold for the company in terms of truth and transparency and only producing things we truly believe are helping and so on. Um, but as terrible as that experience is, and I think about her every single day, um, I still try to find the positive in having lost her, which ultimately it's still heartbreaking to me. But I've tried to take that experience and turn it into something positive in terms of how I'm running the business and the purpose that I find behind my business.
Well, for a parent to like support their child through like a difficult moment like that, and then to go on and see them do what you're doing, or even from the heavens be able to see it, like you're growing a business that from what it looks like you're doing it with the intentions of checking off all the boxes ethically, doing an ethical business to help other people, and like that's really the meaning of, in my opinion, the meaning of success is to be able to do something that you love, something that you're passionate about, something that helps you make, really great money to provide for your loved ones but to also help other people. So, as a parent, wherever that parent may be, to be able to see something like that, pretty incredible, dude. I've been sitting here, for the last 2 days, watching videos about you guys and checking that stuff out. And I was like, really curious to hear like why, like why do you guys, why is it so important to you, right? There's always a why. And I'm really into it, bro. So I have some more questions for you now that we know a little bit more about you and your backstory. You've done, like you've said, you've been able to accomplish some incredible things. You've reversed your biological age. You built a science-backed company. You survived your brain tumor. But for someone hearing your name for the first time, how do you introduce who Chris is and what you're here to do in an elevator pitch?
Okay, who is Chris? So I am a person who has been affected by a difficult health situation, and because I understand how health is the foundation of everything. Like anything we want in our lives, we can only have it if we're healthy. We can only truly experience it if we are healthy. So I see that as the fundamental. Like no amount of money is able to solve issues when it comes to fundamental health, or foundations of health. So health is something that is extremely important to me, and I feel like it's not prioritized enough by a lot of people. And that's because a lot of people are really more focused on short-term gratification, right? The short-term pleasures. And so what I want to do is to, in any ways I'm able to, adapt to the modern standards of living and modern expectations and create products, create tools, create technologies that work with people's standard of living to help them to become the healthiest version of themselves so that we can reduce the suffering that comes from disease and extend healthy lifespan as much as possible. So my vision for Novos is to contribute more than 1 billion years of healthy life to humanity. And so how do we do that? It's not just with our formulations, it's also with the free resources, the knowledge, the tools, the information that we share with people about the things they can do that's absolutely free. They don't have to give us a cent, but they can integrate into their lives that are being scientifically proven to slow down aging, reduce the risk of disease, and lead to a longer, healthier life.
I love that. Okay. I want to break this question up into two parts. One for people who don't have all the resources right now, and one for people that might. Okay. What are 5 things somebody that don't have a lot of resources but are listening to this and are intentional about changing their life, their health, their parents, the people around them to educate themselves? What are 5 things people could do on a low budget to help them overall?
Sure. So the first thing they can do is actually going to save them money, which is eat less food. So most people are overeating. And so if they eat less food, they'll save some money. And so let's take that to the extreme. Actually try to integrate fasting into your routine. So fasting, we can do this in a very simple way and it's very easy to achieve, which is eat fewer than 12 hours per day. So you shouldn't eat the first thing when you wake up, and you shouldn't eat as the last moment before you're going to sleep. Try to have at least 3 hours before you go to bed that you're not eating. And so, all right, get it to 12 hours of no food. Then try to increase that to 14 hours without food, and then maybe 16 hours without food. So for example, I typically eat for 8 hours. So that's like 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I don't eat for the rest of the day. That's actually very doable. Like to wait until 11 a.m. to have a meal and then to have your final meal at 7 p.m.
You're not starving yourself. You're just switching the times that you eat.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Now, if you want to go even further, and this is particularly helpful for people who are overweight, consider doing a prolonged fast, which is 24 hours or longer. That's more challenging. But what's true about our metabolism is that the longer we go without food, so if we do it like we add an hour here and there and we extend that fasting period, it actually becomes easier because our metabolism starts to shift from one that is used to, for example, burning glucose all of the time, so coming from carbs, to one that is burning fatty acids and ketones. It doesn't shift overnight, but as you start to transition into, say, a more metabolically flexible state, then it becomes actually increasingly easy to go to. I've gone 72 hours without food. It sounds like torture. And that the idea of it would have scared me like a decade ago. But it's actually easier than you would think. And you actually feel great when you do it. Like there's a reason why different religions say that when you don't eat, you come closer to God, right? That you feel a closer connection. It's because you actually feel somewhat high. It's not a it's like a natural drug from avoiding food. It's very interesting. So I would say that's the first thing is eating less food. The second thing
Now,
is
before we jump to the other one, I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. You mentioned the
sure.
24-hour. This is something that you're doing once in a while. How often? Because obviously you can't go well eating 24 hours forever, right? So how
Yeah.
like how sporadically do you do it?
Yeah, so I think it's going to vary by person, right? Like I'm already very lean, and but I'm also young and I have a substantial muscle mass. If you're old, let's just say I should
Say
say
that you're
older, not
jacked,
old.
bro. Say that you're jacked, bro. It's okay.
I lift. Let's just say that I lift. Um, but like, let's just say you're older, you're like above 60. For you, you should prioritize maintaining your muscle mass because the last thing you want to do is fast, and when you fast, you start to lose a little bit of muscle. If you do it a lot, you might lose muscle mass in your legs, and now you're more prone to falling, and that's a real risk to pass away from falling.
Hmm.
So, but if you're below 60, you can maintain your muscle mass better. And so then the question is, do you have adequate muscle mass and do you have body fat? So if you have excess body fat, you've got a lot of energy stored in the form of that fat. And when you do these fasts, you can start to shed those pounds pretty quickly. If you're very lean, like I am, then you just want to be a little bit more careful with the amount that you're fasting. Like make sure that you're maintaining your muscle mass. The last thing you want to do is like all these years of hard work that you just like lose it in a few months because you're fasting too much. So how often? I would say it depends on who you are. And
Yeah, your
so
diet and your health,
and
and
your
you gotta ask
exactly.
the doctor. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it could be like once a week. For some people, it might be once a month. But the more often that you do this while doing it in a safe way, based on the guidelines I shared, the more you engage certain processes that are associated with long, healthy lives. For example, something called autophagy. This is a process where our bodies are recycling old cells that are not performing their function well, and they might even be cancerous cells. So the body is smart. It can detect these cells and remove them, but it's going to do this a lot more often when it's starved for calories. It doesn't have calories coming in from food, so it needs to find those calories in the body. And it's actually going to scavenge the old cells that are not doing a good job.
Crazy.
And yeah, it's pretty incredible. So that autophagy is really turned up. The volume on it is turned up when you fast.
The craziest part is that the body knows to do that shit by itself, bro. Like we're not even
Yeah,
thinking about that, like at all. Like we wouldn't even know how to.
exactly. The body is incredible. It's the most advanced computer system, if you will, that it's beyond our comprehension. But there are, I mentioned before, there are 12 mechanisms of aging, 12 root causes of aging. And one of them is impaired intracellular communication. And so, what that essentially is that our cells they all communicate with each other, and they do this by producing different molecules. Lots of those molecules are in the form of proteins. So, peptides and proteins they're all built by amino acids, and so these molecules will actually communicate like a vast computer network to each other, like oh, I'm inflamed. And it's like sending out like this message, I'm inflamed, I need help. And then the body will produce what it needs to come over and start to help that inflamed cell or set of cells or that tissue or that organ. So it really is amazing the way that the body is like a quantum computer, if you will, in terms of its sophistication.
Amazing. All right. So that was number one, or was that number two?
That was number one.
Number one. All right. So we're
Yeah.
up to number two.
Okay, so number two, I'll try to go through these quicker. So number two is when it comes still to nutrition. So it's the timing, like I mentioned, and the amount that you eat in that time, but then also the quality of the foods that you eat. So most people are eating junk foods. These are calorically dense foods and micronutrient hollow. What we really want is something that is nutrient dense and calorically hollow, if you will. So, in other words, you're getting a lot of nutrients for fewer calories.
Gotcha.
And the easy way to do this is to eat foods from the earth. If you're eating vegetables, if you're eating beans, if you're eating nuts and seeds, if you're having fruits, you're having seafood, if you're having um, on occasion maybe some healthy red meat, lean red meats, and so on. All of these foods are good for you, right? The problem is when we're having these overly processed foods that spike our blood glucose. They don't have any real nutrients, micronutrients, and so on in them. So try to prioritize that. There was a study done that actually found that people believe that it's too expensive to be able to eat these types of foods. And while there's a grain of truth in that, if you're trying to get like organic everything, right? Like organic blueberries can be like $10 instead of 3.
Oh, I know.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. But overall, to go from like potato chips to eating an orange and an apple and so on, there was a study done and found that there's really no increase in expense. So to your point about people that have limited budget, this is actually something that's affordable if you're eating fruits and vegetables and chicken and sardines and eggs and stuff like that. It's actually equally as affordable as eating the junk food.
It's almost like propaganda that's put out there to make people think that they're stuck having to eat shit, but they're not really stuck.
They're not stuck. They just have to make the effort, which takes a lot, right? Not
Yeah, it
everyone wants to
does.
make that
It does.
effort, but
It does.
but it is possible, right? So if you care about your health, you can do it at the same budget. So that's number two. Number three, physical activity. So for some people, like myself, I actually overdo the activity, but for most people, they're underdoing the activity. So what's the magic amounts of exercise and activity that you should be doing? So there are studies that have found that the magic number to get Pareto's principle, so that's the 80-20 rule, like maximum benefit for minimum investment, would be about 21 minutes per day of cardiovascular activity will get you about 60 or 70% of the benefits of cardio. So 21 minutes a day is very easy to do, right? You can listen to like 4 songs, 5 songs, and you've got 21 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like super quick. Listen to half a podcast and you're 21 minutes in. So the thing is, you want to try to hit heart rate zone 2 for this. If you don't know what zone 2 is, you can look it up on Google. There are calculators. You put in your age and it will tell you what zone 2 is for you. And so that's getting your heart rate up to a level where you can still talk to people, but it's a little bit of a labored breathing. And for some people, that means just walking. Like if you're obese, that's just walking. If you're a little bit overweight and you haven't been exercising, maybe it's a fast walk. For someone who's in exceptional shape, maybe it's a jog or a run. If you don't feel comfortable walking like a power walker, then like get a backpack and put something heavy in it and walk, and that'll raise your heart rate. But do that for 21 minutes and then try to weight lift 2 to 3 days per week. Get your legs and your upper body when you're doing those workouts. So that's activity. Number four,
It's pretty reasonable, bro. Like you're not asking people to do something super wild.
no, no, that will get you again, like majority of the benefits. You'll be beyond 50% of the benefits by putting in 21 minutes a day. And then when you weight lift or do strength training, it doesn't have to be weightlifting. It could be push-ups and, things that you can do just like while watching TV at your home. Uh, let's say that adds like another 25 minutes twice a week. So another 50 minutes. It's under an hour of strength training for the whole week. So that's very doable too. Uh, Next, I'd say this is number four, sleep. Prioritize your sleep. So the last thing you want to do is go to sleep at different times every night. You want to stay within ideally 30-minute window of bedtime, at max maybe an hour. Now, sometimes I cheat with that on the weekends. Like I'll go to bed 2 hours after my normal bedtime, but I'm very strict from like Sunday to Thursday night. I'm going to sleep at about 10:30 every single night. And then weekends, it might be, midnight or something like that. And a special occasion, it'll be even later. But for the most part, I'm staying within an hour or so of my bedtime.
That's a very
And
important hard. It's a hard one for a lot of people. Yeah.
it is difficult. And so this is a whole concept of sleep hygiene. You want to uh, consider a few factors. One is sound, another is light, another is temperature. And all of these are going to impact the quality of your sleep. So you want to make sure that your bedroom is pitch black. If it's not pitch black, get a high quality sleep mask. If you have a partner that turns on the lights, or they get up earlier than you, or go to bed later than you, or they're on their phone in bed, get that sleep mask, because even if you think you're sleeping, that light, it still gets through your eyelids and it's still disrupting the quality of your sleep. So get that sleep mask, $10. It costs practically nothing. Get earplugs, especially again, if you have a partner that makes noise, they go into the bathroom, you have a dog that walks around, you have garbage trucks moving around at night outside. At least when I was in Manhattan, that was a common theme. So get the earplugs. And so that's the sound. And then temperature, you want it to be very cold, like 66, 67, 68 degrees. Now, some people say that's way too cold. Get a heavy blanket. The point is that while you're sleeping, you're going to move your body. You're going to expose your back or expose your legs or expose your arm. Your body's going to temperature control while you're sleeping. But if it's not cold enough, you're not going to be able to do that. And you're going to like take the covers off completely and try to like cool yourself off and lay on your stomach so your back is exposed. And those are the worst things
You
for
don't
the
go
quality of your
you
sleep.
don't go into deep sleep, right? So then that affects you because you're not really rested.
Exactly. You're not well rested.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do if that temperature is too cool, or maybe it's too expensive to get the air down to 66 degrees in a hot summer in New York or in Florida, get a fan, a ceiling fan or a floor fan pointed directly at you. That can also help to keep you cool, even if the temperature is a little bit hotter than ideal.
I have the blackout curtains, I have a sleep mask, and I have a bed jet. I have a bed jet that it blasts cool air if I want or warm air if I want right through the sheets. Oh, bro, it's
Yep.
the best. Some people
Those are great.
chili pads. There's different brands.
Yeah, I used to have the bed jet in New York, and now more recently I got the 8 sleep pad, which
Oh,
like
that's my next upgrade. Yeah, you're liking it?
yeah, I do. I found like yesterday it came in handy because I just joined a run club here, and the run ends at like past 7 p.m. and that keeps me warm as I'm falling asleep. And you need to be cool to fall asleep well. And so I just set the 8 sleep to be a couple of levels cooler than I normally would have it, and it cools me down quicker. And so I end up sleeping better than I would have otherwise if I didn't have the 8 sleep.
So this is like a great like segue into like what we were talking. Okay, so we were talking about some things that you could do that are free or next to nothing. Now let's talk about some optimization, including Novos, like where somebody says, okay, I'm ready for that next level. I could invest into myself a little bit more. I'm seeing results here. Where in which direction can we go now?
Yeah, so let's start with supplements. So the first thing I would say for supplements is make sure that you have all of your bases covered. So I'm going to break down supplements into, let's say, 3 different categories. One is general health supplements. Another is longevity supplements, which is what my company Novos specializes in. And then the third category is any other specialty supplements that you might care about for your life. So general health supplements, these are the things that we need just to avoid short-term illness and disease. This is what the government has an RDA for. It's what you see on nutrient fact panels. Like you need enough magnesium and potassium and calcium. You need the B vitamins and A, D, E, K, and so on. So you want to make sure that you're getting all of those. And most people, almost 100% of people, are getting an inadequate intake of at least one nutrient, whether that be vitamin D or vitamin K or choline, which comes from egg yolks and so on. So, what I tend to suggest to people when they ask me, like, what supplements would you recommend? I say this as a blanket recommendation for everyone: get a high quality multivitamin, not like a cheap one from the drugstore brand, but get something. It still can be affordable, but something like Life Extension brand or Thorn or Pure Encapsulations. These are 3 high quality brands that make multivitamins you can find on Amazon. Get those, have it with a meal. Second is eat fatty fish. If you don't eat fatty fish like sardines or mackerel and salmon, then get a high quality fish oil supplement. People with low levels of omega-3 fat intake have similar risk profiles to smokers. So simply from not getting enough fish oil.
Yeah.
So that's the second thing. The third thing, and I would argue maybe the final thing, is vitamin D and K. So you want to take them together. So get one that has both of them in one pill, and take a oral form of vitamin D because you're probably not getting enough from the sun, especially if you live in a northern latitude where you're only in the sun for a few months out of the year. So that's the foundation. So now on to longevity supplements. If you want to take things to the next level and target the biological causes of aging, these 12 mechanisms, and try to slow down the process of aging and slow down the negative effects from aging, that's where Novos comes in. We've got three different products. One is Novos Core. That's our foundational formula. We filed for patents on this. We created the formulation with our scientific advisors out of Harvard Medical School, MIT, the Salk Institute. So top scientists in the world helped us formulate it. We've run scientific studies on the formula. We found that, for example, we reduce DNA damage from irradiation. It's like UV rays or irradiation. We reduce it from uh, chemotherapeutics. So we did a human um, skin study looking at keratinocytes. It's a specific type of skin cell we all have. And we administered chemotherapeutics, and we showed that we were able to reduce single and double strand breaks to the DNA. And this was in a peer reviewed scientific study. We've shown that we can reduce something called cellular senescence, which is zombie cells that accumulate as we age, and they cause things like our skin to wrinkle and our arteries to get harder. We reduced that significantly. We did a mouse study and we showed we extended mouse lifespan, aged mouse lifespan by more than any supplement ever studied. And it was almost 20% extension of lifespan. And so obviously humans are not mice, but when we start to do mammalian studies and we see that we can extend lifespan, there's reason to believe that there's the potential to do the same in humans. And so what we next look at is, are there signs in humans that we are having this type of effect on them? And one way we did this was with a case study where we administered our product to people over the span of 6 months, and we gave them what's called an epigenetic test before and after taking our product for 6 months. So the epigenetic test is the most advanced way that scientists are able to measure how fast or slow you're aging. So this is that idea of biological age. And we showed that we were able to slow down biological aging in this case study by the equivalent of 1 month per year for almost three-quarters of the people taking the product. And the one quarter that did not slow down also did not speed up. So nobody, zero people in the case study had accelerated aging, and three-quarters slowed down their aging. And so this is the type of evidence that we're accumulating at scientific laboratories to start to prove out that our formula is efficacious, that it works, and that it's unlike anything else that has ever existed on the market. And that's Novos Core. Very quickly, the other two products, Novos Boost is a daily pill. This is to raise levels of NAD. NAD is a molecule that can lead to energy production in our cells, protecting our DNA, mitochondrial health, and so on. And our levels decline starting around 20 years old. And so NMN produces NAD. And so our product is a simple ingredient, NMN. It's been popularized by Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard, who wrote the New York Times bestselling book, Lifespan. And so that's our second product. And then our third product is Novos Vital, and they're daily gummies. They're sour mango flavor, and they target the 7 organs that decline significantly as we age. So specifically the brain, eyes, heart, liver, kidneys, muscle, and gut. So we have 7 ingredients that target 7 organs. It's really power-packed gummies. Most gummies are just candy and they don't really have any nutrients in it. We like, it took us more than a year of prototyping to be able to fit all of these ingredients into the gummies. But it's like a sweet treat that you can have after your meal. It has no unhealthy sugars in it. And so that's really about optimizing your organs.
Beautiful. I love it. So we have we just went over those 3 products. Previous to that, we talked about 8 Sleep, which I know is a little bit of an investment, but hey, I mean, you're not buying it a bunch of times, right? So
Yeah.
worth it. It's literally where you're spending a quarter of your life on that thing.
Yeah.
What other things can people do if they're really looking to spend money? And I mean, I'm not saying blow $1 million, but if they got a little bit of money in their pocket that they could do that, that could complement your system, your protocol.
Yeah, great question. So there's all different directions people can go, and this is where like biohacking comes in. And I think that a lot of the stuff that people are pushing, it not that they're necessarily snake oil, though some of them certainly are. It's more a question of like what size of an impact is it going to make on your health relative to the cost? And are you neglecting fundamentals that you should be focusing on first before you even consider any of these biohacks, right?
Yeah.
So an example of that would be something that actually has a good amount of scientific evidence behind. It's actually a medical treatment, is hyperbaric oxygen chambers. So hyperbaric oxygen, you go into one of these chambers and they increase the pressure of the oxygen. And it can be 1.5, 1.7, 2 or more atmospheres of pressure. And it's used in medical context, for example, to help cure a diabetic foot ulcer, which might not ever heal. But then people, when they go into these machines after, maybe a dozen sessions, it's suddenly healed, right? And the way it works is when you have high pressure of oxygen, that oxygen is getting to the cells that it was otherwise not getting to because that pressure is actually pushing the oxygen to access those cells that it otherwise wouldn't. And now those cells can actually um, uh, have the respiration that they need to perform their function. Cells need oxygen, right? And so that's one way. But another way that it can actually benefit people that don't have a health condition, but they want to do it for longevity's sake, is that oxygen, although it can help your cells to perform their function, it's actually a double-edged sword, which is that it causes oxidation. So just like rust, oxygen causes rust. It also causes damage within our bodies. But the interesting thing is that when you do a session for say an hour, you've got now 23 hours where your body recovers. And just like exercise is a stress to our bodies as well, but then you've got the rest of the day to recover, the oxygen, the hyperbaric oxygen is a stress that your body has time to recover from. And it actually becomes stronger in the process. And so when we look at the mechanisms of aging that I keep referring to, some that are favorably impacted are, for example, your mitochondrial health. So the power plants of our cells that convert our food into energy, those are improved from hyperbaric oxygen. Our telomeres, these are the end caps of our DNA, and they get shorter and shorter. Think of them as like the ends of your shoelaces. They get shorter and shorter. Eventually, if they get too short, the DNA comes out and it's frayed, kind of like the threads of a shoelace would get frayed if you
Yeah.
lose the cap. So it's actually been shown that hyperbaric chambers can elongate the telomeres. And then also epigenetic tests. So I just mentioned them before about Novos
Right.
and our products showing that we could slow down epigenetic aging. These hyperbaric chambers have been shown to be able to reduce biological age as measured by the epigenome. And those are just a few examples of some of the positive longevity benefits that these chambers can provide. But if you're not eating healthy and you're not sleeping well and you're not doing some physical
Yeah.
activity, why are you spending $150 a session on one of these chambers when you should really focus on the fundamentals first?
Is there anything that you could share that you feel is complete nonsense and like you have a bone to pick with maybe some shit that's going around that you see people do that you're like, hey, maybe that's actually a little bit dangerous, or maybe you should read it into it a little bit more before you do that. Is there anything that comes to mind?
I think so. The first thing I would say is that when it comes to these different interventions, you need to consider risk and benefit. So if somebody is recommending something to someone that is actually highly risky and could cause harm, then we need to take those things a lot more seriously than other things that might still not necessarily do anything good for you, but are not going to cause any harm. So I'll give two examples. The idea of earthing or grounding. That's like taking your shoes and socks off and standing on the earth. And the belief is that this is going to make you healthier because um, you're going to like reduce the oxidative damage in your body, and that like electrons are going to be flowing through the earth out like, and you're going to change the charge of your body from touching the earth and so on. And when you look at the scientific studies, there are very, very few of them. And the ones that exist are very small sample size, like not many people in them. And what we also don't see is all of the studies that may have failed. So they never got published because they failed. So we only see this small number of studies. And when you hear the arguments for the biophysics of how this supposedly works, it's not convincing. Like it's based on biophysics that don't exist. So my perspective on grounding is that there might be benefits that come from it, but I don't think it's because your feet are in contact with the earth. I think it's because you're actually taking time to kind of de-stress, to be in nature.
Intentional, yeah.
And
Yeah.
and yeah, you're living with intention for those moments. It's kind of meditative. Your stress can go down. Just like we see when people go into um, blue spaces, which is by the ocean, or green spaces, like in the woods and so on, people's cortisol levels decline, their health issues decline, and so on, and lifespan increases for people that are living in very green areas as opposed to cities. So there's a number of different explanations for why grounding would work that I think are more likely than the biophysics explanation. So that's an example of something which has practically no risk, and the reason why it might work or might not work is debatable, but I'm somewhat skeptical of the arguments for it. But at the same time, there's no harm. So go ahead. If it works for you, it works for you. Do it. Now, on the other side of things is take, for example, peptide therapies. So there's a lot of
Seen a lot of that.
biohack.
Seen a lot of that. Yeah.
Exactly. And you hear some prominent influencers talking about it as well in the health world, podcasters and so on. You've got these longevity clinics and biohacker labs and so on injecting peptides. So a couple of things to note about peptides. Peptides are short chains of amino acids. So if you think of a protein that's a long chain, peptides are just shorter chains. Peptides can be incredibly powerful. They can potentially kill you. So insulin is a peptide. If you overdose on insulin, it can kill you. So peptides should be taken seriously. Now, some peptides are going to be more dangerous than others. I'm not saying all peptides are similar to insulin, but what I would say is that they are, first of all, the majority of them, or the ones that are at least being administered at these clinics, are not FDA approved. They have not had long-term safety studies to prove that they are safe enough to take. There are certain peptides, like for example, there's one called melanotan 2, which people would inject because it makes you tan. It increases melanin production. So you don't need to be out in the sun and you become tan. Sounds great, right? It also causes like unstoppable erections, very high libido, but then also a number of significant side effects, including like cardiovascular,
Hilarious.
unstoppable erections, and amazing libido, which like sounds like a dream come true for some people. But then it comes with heart risks, right? And a number of other risks. And so that's something that should obviously be avoided, but some people are self-administering it. So my point is simply this, like, again, it comes down to risk versus benefit. And I think that there are a number of doctors and practitioners that are not adequately communicating risks to patients before administering peptides. They present the peptides as this great substance that will inject, and hey, we're going to increase your growth hormone, or hey, we're
Out or something. Yeah, they're like it's some like regular thing. Is what
like,
you,
it's, yeah,
yeah.
oh, this is natural, like let's avoid the pharmaceutical route, and like I'll inject these natural peptides in you. They're not natural. And if you look at things like semaglutide is a peptide, right? That is a prescription drug. And so to say that peptides that have not been FDA approved, that are being synthesized by a compounding pharmacy, they might even have contaminants. That's a whole other issue, but let's assume that they don't. They are every bit as powerful as prescription drugs, and they also have similar potential risk profiles that are not fully studied. And so I think that it is a doctor's responsibility is to first do no harm and to make the patient fully aware of the risks and the benefits. And I've never heard a single doctor to this day caution patients about potential risks from peptides. Now, I'm sure some doctors do, they probably exist, but I think it's a small minority. And most doctors just push in these alternative circles. I'm not
Right,
saying regular traditional doctors
right, right.
um, are pushing these peptides. And so, not to say that you should never take any sort of peptide for, you might have a special use case for it, whatever. Like you decide that with your doctor, but just be aware that they are very powerful substances that over the long term have not been studied for their risk profiles.
Hey man, thanks for sharing your perspective. I really appreciate that. And something very important I want to ask you, and it's how do you want to be remembered, Chris?
I want to be remembered as somebody who, in the generic sense, left a positive mark on the world, but in a specific way, I want to be remembered as somebody who helped people to achieve a higher level of health and maintain it for a longer period of time. Because I know firsthand, first of all, how difficult things can be when you are sick or your loved one gets very sick. But also, I'm one who has experienced optimizing my health and how much richer life is when you feel energized, when you feel physically and mentally and emotionally capable. And all of these things are modulated by how healthy we live our lives. So I want to help people to achieve that higher state of being, if you will,
Yeah.
um, and to maintain that for as long as possible.
Yeah, so many people like have normalized feeling like shit, looking like shit, like just being in like this rut that
Yeah.
y'all, if you're listening to this and you're feeling like that, it's perfectly normal to not feel great sometimes. But there is another side to how you like perceive the world and how you feel when you wake up and how you communicate with people. It can get better, and sometimes it starts with things as simple as the five free things that Chris shared with us that you could do, all the way to taking supplements and being part of the Novos community. There's many things that you could do, whether you're at the mark where you can't spend a lot of money or whether you're in a really good financial situation. So, with that being said, if y'all learned something today, if you want to learn more, make sure you guys follow Chris on social media, follow Novos. We're going to link the social media profiles on the websites to the episode show notes. So, if you're listening on a streaming platform, on YouTube, wherever you're listening on our website, you'll be able to find it on the show notes. And if you have any questions for Chris, I'm sure he's probably active on social media. His team will be able to help you out. But Chris, if you want to leave us with anything else, man, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So if you want to find me on social, it's slow my age. And then Novos is Novos Labs. So all of the social platforms, Slow My Age and Novos Labs, also websites, slowmyage.com and novoslabs.com.
All right, y'all, you heard it. This is Hustle Inspires Hustle. See you on the next episode.